Hello and welcome to the video. My name is Mathias Eckhart. I'm currently doing my master's degree in Near Eastern Archaeology at the University of Copenhagen, Denmark, and today I'm going to talk about the Diana Kirkbride Archive. The Kirkbride Archive is a sizable collection of artifacts, photographs, and all kinds of documents that have been collected from the late 50s all up to the 90s. Before going into further detail about the Kirkbride Archive, I have a few things that I want to say. First, I will quickly explain the core fundamentals of archaeology for any non-archaeologists that might be watching this video to avoid confusion. Secondly, I will talk a bit about archaeological archives in general, and lastly I will talk about the whole idea and thought process behind this video before delving into the dusty realm of the Kirkbride Archive. When people hear that I'm an archaeologist, they usually reference Indiana Jones and ask if I have dug up any gold treasures yet. Even though being an archaeologist does include digging old things up from the ground, excavating is far from being the only task of the job. The reason why we do dig up old things from the ground is to try and make sense of the past. Archaeology is in many ways a destructive process, where we have to destroy ancient sites and buildings to uncover even more ancient things buried beneath, because people tend to build in the same place over and over again. For this destruction to be justified, we have to document every little step of the process. It's through this documentation of the process that we can study and interpret the results of the excavation. Archaeological excavations produce large amount of material, not only all the unearthed artifacts, but also all the things involved in the recording of the finds and other administrative tasks. This includes things such as artifact drawings, map, excavation diaries, inventory lists, receipts, and more. Especially before the digital age, excavations generated huge collections of paperwork, and I happen to have access to one such huge collection of paperwork, also known as an archive. Sometimes the director of an excavation does not manage to publish all the results of the excavation in their lifetime, which is quite unfortunate since archaeology is not only about acquiring knowledge about the past, but more so about sharing that knowledge. Because if the knowledge isn't properly shared, it might as well not have been acquired in the first place. Even when the results of an excavation are properly published, it is still a good idea to hold on to the archive material to enable further study in the future. This leads to the whole reason for making this video, because now is the future. I'm currently enrolled in a course called Project-Based Course, where we have been assigned the task of making whatever project we like as long as it concerns the Diana Kirkbride Archive. My personal opinion is that academic archaeology is in need of a change in its ways of conveying the results of the work, since many archaeological publications are locked behind paywalls on various websites. And even though what seems to be an increasing number of archaeologists do release their research as open access, there is still too far between them. And for people who are interested in archaeology and who are not connected to an institution which grants them access to the paid publications, it can be expensive to follow the latest publications. While sometimes being difficult to access, archaeological publications can also be difficult to understand due to their specialized language, especially for people who haven't studied archaeology at an academic level. These challenges are not tied to archaeology alone, but many, if not most, fields of research. I'm not the one to propose a solution to these supposed problems in this video, but I wanted to mention it because it was an inspiration for my project, and I will try my very best to make this video appeal to a wider audience and prove to everyone, including myself, that the less hands-on parts of archaeology can be entertaining while still be educational. When I started researching for this video, I had a clear goal in mind, that being creating a timeline of the beta excavations based on the letters from the archive, with the purpose of shining some light on some of the lesser known behind the scenes information about the excavations. And I hope to be able to give an insight into the inner workings of archaeological excavations in a format that would hopefully appeal to archaeologists as well as non-archaeologists. What I did not anticipate before reading through the letters was how large a part of them were personal letters not related to Kirkbride's work as an archaeologist. This forced me to rethink the purpose of this video, and since the information I gathered about the excavations as beta was rather lackluster, I chose to broaden the perspective. While still including some of the information that I found about the beta excavations, I decided to try and reflect on what it means to work such archives and the difficulties one might encounter, all based on my experiences with the Kirkbride Archive. And here a little disclaimer. If you see a spelling mistake in any of the quotes from the letters that I've included, it is most likely because I transcribed the letters exactly as they were written to preserve authenticity. Also, I'm dyslexic. As you might have been able to gather from my previous rambling, the archive contains a lot of letters, some 30 folders full of letters. Of course, the archive does not only contain letters, but many other things too, such as various artifacts, drawings, maps, photos, diaries, and more. One of the first challenges I encountered when reading through the vast amount of letters was the fact that in quite a few cases we only have the letters that Kirkbride received and not the ones she sent, which shouldn't have surprised me since that's how letters work. In most cases, where we do have letters written by Kirkbride herself, they're either drafts or copies. Reading the letters made me feel more like an investigative detective than an archaeologist. Even though some of the letters do concern archaeology in one way or the other, a sizable part of them concern deeply private matters. Without having ever met Kirkbride, I still have a feeling that I somewhat have gotten to know her after spending countless hours snooping around in her once private letters. It is truly a strange feeling reading some of the more emotional letters that she sent to her close friends and family, and I can't stop feeling like I'm intruding and reading things that weren't meant to be read by strangers from the future. I did run into a couple of letters labeled confidential, which I obviously did not include. But where do we draw the line? As stated on the University of Copenhagen's webpage, the Diana Kirkbride Archive database is a part of our initiative to make the archive material located at tor/ku available to researchers and the public. Depending on how you interpret this quote, one might be compelled to think that the goal is to make the whole of the archive available to the public. I don't know what the exact intention is, but I will not be the one to share information about Kirkbride that I would not like to be shared about myself when I pass someday. Because of my respect for the privacy of Kirkbride, I will not be sharing the more delicate details from the letters. I've chosen to not include any of the letters concerning the more bureaucratic side of archaeology, since I find it extremely boring, and I could imagine that it's not very entertaining nor educational to listen to a guy listing almost identical letters from Kirkbride requesting various grants and excavation money. Also, in reading Kirkbride's letters, it becomes very clear that she despised asking for money in what she herself called begging letters. A task that I'm sure most archaeologists don't find very appealing. Now I've mentioned the name Kirkbride around 20 times without telling you much about her. Here's what you find when you look her up on Wikipedia. Diana Victoria Walkup Kirkbride Helbig, born 22nd of October 1915, died 13th of August 1997, was a British archaeologist who specialized in the prehistory of Southwest Asia. She attended the Wycombe Abbey School in High Wycombe and served in the Women's Royal Navy Service during the Second World War. She completed a postgraduate diploma at University College London in 1950, studying Mesopotamian and Palestinian archaeology under Sir Max Mallowan and Dame Kathleen Kenyon. Kirkbride went to work on the excavations of Jericho from 1952 to 1955. In 1953, she began fieldwork in Jordan, including the restoration of the Jericho Theatre and excavations at Petra in 1956. She also discovered a major Neolithic site at Beta, where she led the excavations for the British School of Archaeology in Jerusalem from 1958 until 1967. It was doing this work that she met the Danish paleobotanist Hans Helbig, whom she married at the end of the 60s. She continued work in Iraq in the 1970s, where she made another discovery of another Neolithic site called Dabagia. After her husband died of a stroke in the late 1970s, she returned to Beta for a season of excavations in 1983. She also finished work compiling the results from Beta and Dabagia and started planning a new excavation at the Neptune temple at Wadi Rum, which was not completed before her death in August 1997 at Aarhus, Denmark. As can be seen in the description of Kirkbride based on the information from Wikipedia, nearly everything mentioned about her concerns her professional life. This is not a critique, since I'm sure most people would like their deepest secrets not to be mentioned on their Wikipedia page. But since I have access to the information, I thought it might be interesting to portray the person behind the career while trying not to overshare. I can start by saying that apparently Kirkbride was sometimes called Jit or Jitty, which I think means something in Arabic that I haven't been able to figure out. The overall impression that I get about her is that she seems to have been a smart, kind, and loving person, with dear friends and good colleagues all over the globe, congratulating her work and helping her, both in the field and by securing money, and also by cheering her up when life got difficult. Kirkbride definitely had strong opinions about many things in life, which are clearly expressed in the following quotes. In a way, I think I'm fairly glad I am from my generation. It seems to me that archaeology is becoming the haunt of fiddlers, or perhaps I should call them knitters. The whole rapidly becoming bogged down with computers, the craze for flotation, graphs, statistics, and the Lord knows what else. I suppose it is just possible that in the end it might boil down to better understanding of our material and therefore of those who made it, though at the moment it seems that the younger generations tend to lose sight of the human beings behind it all. For a lady born in 1915, it doesn't surprise that she wasn't fond of computers and new archaeological methods. although she does admit that they might help aid the understanding of the past. The next quote is from the 5th of March 1982. By the way, I've just discovered that Irma has gone broke and I fear bloody Posen is trying to buy it. Isn't that a total disaster? I think the government should step in and keep Irma going. It is, after all, a different class of place. I also received a notice from the Poles asking me to attend a meeting to discuss buying Irma, but I want nothing to do with the beastly people. For any non-Danes watching this video, Irma is the most expensive and prestigious chain of grocery stores in Denmark, while Brugsen is more mundane, and Kirkbride clearly did enjoy the finer things in life. As might already be evident, Kirkbride was definitely a lady with a healthy sense of humor and self-irony, both perfectly showed in this quote from a letter from the 14th of March 1988. You know us from Baghdad. Ramadan or no Ramadan, the drink will be there. It will be a short visit, but quite an adventure for a half-paralyzed old woman like me. As I'm sure most people can relate to, life isn't always pure joy, and Kirkbride's life was no exception. It is no secret that Kirkbride lost her beloved husband, the brilliant Danish paleobotanist Hans Peter Helbig, which understandably took a toll on her. The 26th of July 1982. I am indeed proud to have known, let alone been married to Hans for over 16 years. He could have excelled in at least 10 different careers. Extraordinary creature that he was. On that somber note, I will move on to talk about what might be classified as Kirkbride's life work, Beta. First, I will give a brief overview of Beta, directly stolen from Brian Bird's 2005 book on Beta, because why reinvent the wheel? Beta is situated 4.5 kilometers north of the well-known Nabatean site of Petra in southern Jordan. Beta was excavated for 8 seasons, 7 between 1958 and 1967, and a final one in 1983. The research focused on examining the economy and intrasite spatial patterning of the early Neolithic village. The chief aim of the excavations were to spread sideways rather than dig deeply, except in small soundings, to try and find out the plan of a Neolithic village and to obtain evidence for the practice of agriculture and domestication of animals. In short, to try to reconstruct the economy of the village life. It was also hoped that a firm connection could be established with Jericho pre-pottery Neolithic B in order to expand our knowledge of that civilization. This approach was a reaction to Diana Kirkbride Helbig's experience at the massive Tell of Jericho, where she served as a supervisor on a deep sounding into the early Neolithic for Kathleen Canyon. The fieldwork revealed that Beta is a multi-component site with 3 discrete periods of habitation: an early Natufian encampment, a PP&B village, and ultimately terraced Nabatean agricultural fields. In terms of letters, I haven't found much of interest from before 1966 other than personal correspondences and letters involving applications for grants and other practical matters, which, as mentioned earlier, will not be discussed in this video. The year 1966 marks the 3rd year without excavations at Beta, with the other 2 breaks occurring in 1960 and 1962. In a letter dated to the 8th of June 1966, Kirkbride explains that she has chosen not to excavate at Beta that year because the astonishing results from the last campaign need a little time for digestion, and I do not want to overload. So this coming period will be devoted to paperwork, and by next spring, I hope to be ready to start again with all the material to date duly studied. In the following year, in 1967, Kirkbride and her team were back in the field, conducting the 7th excavation at Beta. When the end of that year's excavation was approaching, misfortune struck, not once, but twice. First, Kirkbride and her team encountered what she describes as a freak storm, which resulted in the flooding of the excavated trenches, deeming excavation impossible. Not long after the freak storm, the second misfortune struck, the outbreak of the Six-Day War. In a letter from the 11th of December 1981, Kirkbride writes, "The work was stopped abruptly, to say the least, by the outbreak of the Arab-Israel War of 1967. It was halted at a crucial stage, and we left without all sections drawn and no wrapping up. But we're not worried, because we thought the break would only be a matter of months. Ironically, it has lasted until now, through circumstances beyond my control." In the 70s, Kirkbride shifted her focus to Iraq, where she worked at the site of Bagia. The 27th of January 1974. My only news is that this year finishes my contract in Iraq. Seems hardly possible that 5 years have almost gone. I come out at the end of September. Needless to say, as soon as is ready for press, I hope by summer 1975, I will be turning my thoughts back to finishing Beta. As explained in the following quote, her wish to return to Beta in 1975 did not happen. 11th of December 1981. After I left Iraq in 1975, the health of my poor husband began to decline, and so, despite a Wainwright giving for the express purpose of finishing Beta, I was never able to leave home for long enough to comply. As you know, Hans died earlier this year. I finally agreed to go out and have a go, but now I'm in a hurry to get it over and then try to make the kind of report the site undoubtedly deserves, and which I cannot do until after this essential season. The 5th of March 1982. The Beta stakes have now reached the dizzy heights of £2,000, as I need £37,000. I cannot see the dig taking place in the near future. Sad in a way, because I never did have more than £3,200 in the old days, and that was enough for about 10 weeks digging. Just shows what has happened to the value of money. 12th of June 1982. I was completely overcome with joy and gratitude when your letter arrived this morning. Please convey my heartfelt thanks to the Board of Management for the generous contribution towards Beta. I only hope the Near East doesn't blow up in the meantime. It will be a great relief to me to be able to finish off tightly and get that publication out before something happens to me. At least I hope the strain of sudden fieldwork after years of being housebound does not kill me outright. 25th of June 1982. The answers to the last 3 of my begging letters means that I can at least start making a few plans. I'm still suffering from shock, as I never imagined I would get enough lolly to even plan, but I think we are in business. 26th of June 1982. They started bullying me to go back and finish my dig at Beta. I suppose I have no strength of character, but after putting up resistance for some time, I finally gave in. The rest of my visit was taken up with writing begging letters for support. Quite terrible, and I don't really want to go back to all that dust, heat and flies, etc., etc. Too old now, and too spoiled, and maybe a bit tired too. Anyway, I confronted myself with the thought that I would never raise enough money, but I have, provided Jordan gives me a little help, so now I am for the high jump once more. As seen in the last quotes, Kirkbride expressed some contradictory feeling about going back to Beta, from being overcome with joy and gratitude to not wanting to go back. The last quote that I will include in this video is rather short but important. 7th of November 1982. Brian Bird to Kirkbride. Thank you for replying to my letter. Of course I accept the position as a site supervisor, and I'm particularly interested about the opportunity of being in charge of a possible sounding into the Natufian levels. Brian Bird joined Kirkbride's last season of excavation at Beta in 1983, which would prove to have quite the impact on the future publication of the Beta research. In 1987, Bird joined Kirkbride and Pelle Mortensen in the Beta publication project, and in 1989, Bird published the book The Natufian Encampment at Beta, which, as the title says, focused on the Natufian occupation at Beta. It was sadly only in 2005, 8 years after Kirkbride passed, that the second part of the Beta publication was released. The book Early Village Life at Beta, Jordan, Neolithic Spatial Organization and Vernacular Architecture. I'm sure that Kirkbride would have been proud of Bird's excellent publication of her work. If you've made it this far, congratulations, and thank you very much for your attention.